The announcement of the end. The Galactic Council chamber floated in the void between star systems, a monument to 10,000 years of cooperation among civilized species. Its crystalline walls reflected the light of distant galaxies, creating prismatic patterns that shifted with each deliberate movement of the assembled delegates. Today, however, no one admired the architecture. Every eye lens and sensory organ focused on the holographic display dominating the center of the chamber, where reality itself appeared to be unraveling. Dr. Sarah Chen stood among the human delegation, her fingers unconsciously gripping the edge of her datapad as the keeper of cosmic knowledge. An ancient being whose species had witnessed the birth of galaxies, delivered the verdict that would echo through eternity. The keeper's form shimmered with bioluminescence, each pulse seeming to carry the weight of incomprehensible grief. The calculations have been verified across all methodologies. The keeper's voice resonated through universal translators, stripping away any hope of misunderstanding. Heat-death acceleration has reached critical threshold. The universe will not expand forever as predicted. Instead, vacuum decay has begun at the edges of observable space, propagating inward at near light speed. We estimate complete dissolution of all matter within 12,000 standard years. 12,000 years. In cosmic terms, it was less than a heartbeat. In practical terms, it meant that every child born today would die knowing their descendants had no future. Every dream, every achievement, every civilization's accumulated wisdom would dissolve into quantum foam and eternal darkness. The chamber erupted into chaos. The Vraxian ambassador, whose species had survived 3 extinction events through careful preparation, began emitting distress pheromones so potent that nearby delegates activated emergency air filters. The synthetic consciousness representing the collective uploaded itself into 16 backup servers simultaneously, a reflexive response to existential threat that accomplished nothing. The Zephyrian trade minister simply folded all 6 of her wings and entered a catatonic state, her species' biological shutdown when confronted with insurmountable danger. Sarah watched it all with a peculiar clarity that surprised even herself. Around her, the other human delegates maintained a stillness that contrasted sharply with the pandemonium. Commander Marcus Webb, the military liaison, had his jaw set in that familiar expression that meant he was already problem-solving. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the xenobiologist, was taking notes with steady hands. Even Ambassador Rodriguez, who had a reputation for emotional speeches, simply observed with focused intensity. This cannot be. The Vraxian ambassador's translator crackled through the noise. Our sun temples hold prophecies spanning millions of years. Our god stars promised us eternity. Mathematics cares nothing for promises, the keeper replied with something that might have been sympathy. The prophecies were written when we believed the universe stable. We were wrong. A crystalline delegate, whose species communicated through harmonic frequencies, produced a sound so mournful it bypassed the translators entirely, resonating directly with the limbic systems of every biological being present. It was the sound of hope dying, and several species began to weep in their own ways. Emergency motion, called out the Thulian representative, a species known for bureaucratic precision even in crisis. I propose immediate resource allocation toward preservation protocols. We must construct generation archives, preserve genetic databases, record all knowledge into quantum-locked vaults that might survive the decay. Seconded, came voices from multiple delegates. It was the logical response, the reasonable response. If they could not prevent the end, perhaps they could leave some monument to their existence, some proof that they had lived and thought and dreamed. Sarah felt Commander Webb shift beside her. She knew that movement. He wanted to speak but was waiting for Ambassador Rodriguez to make the call. The ambassador caught his eye and gave a subtle nod. Webb stepped forward, his voice cutting through the chamber with the practiced authority of someone accustomed to being heard in crisis situations. With respect to the Galactic Council, the human delegation requests permission to present an alternative perspective. The keeper's luminescence dimmed to a focused point, directed at the humans. You wish to speak of hope? Your species is young. You have not yet learned that some endings cannot be written differently. Actually, Sarah heard her own voice before she realized she was speaking, her scientist mind overriding social protocol. We've gotten pretty good at rewriting endings everyone said were inevitable. It's kind of our thing. A ripple of what might have been laughter or might have been contempt moved through several delegates. The Vraxian ambassador's translator carried an edge of derision. The humans wish to lecture us on impossibility? Your species has barely mastered interstellar travel. You know nothing of true cosmic timescales. Ambassador Rodriguez stepped forward now, his diplomatic training evident in every measured word. You're right. We're young. Our oldest civilizations barely span 10,000 years. We've nearly destroyed ourselves multiple times. We've faced extinction from disease, from war, from our own stupidity. He paused, letting that sink in. But we're still here. And do you know why? The chamber had grown quiet. Even the distressed pheromones had dissipated. Because humanity has never accepted that any problem is truly unsolvable, Rodriguez continued. We split the atom when physics said it couldn't be done. We cured diseases that killed billions. We looked at space and decided gravity was just a suggestion. Every time someone tells us something is impossible, we hear it as a challenge. Dr. Tanaka added, her voice gentle but firm. The universe is dying. We understand that. The mathematics is clear. But mathematics also said heavier than air flight was impossible. It said you couldn't break the speed of sound. It said quantum entanglement couldn't transmit information. She smiled slightly. Mathematics is a tool, not a prophecy. It describes what is, not what must be. The keeper's form pulsed with an emotion the translators rendered as profound curiosity mixed with ancient sorrow. You propose to fight entropy itself? To reverse the fundamental decay of reality? This is beyond arrogance. This is delusion. Sarah took a breath, feeling the weight of 12,000 years of borrowed time pressing down on her shoulders. Maybe it is. But here's what I know. Every species in this chamber has accepted the end. You're planning monuments and archives. You're preparing to die with dignity. She looked around at the assembled delegates, meeting eyes and sensors and crystalline facets. That's not the human way. We don't prepare to die. We prepare to fight. And if we're going to die anyway, we might as well die trying to do the impossible. Commander Webb's voice carried military certainty. We request permission to establish a research initiative. Not to preserve what was, but to discover what might be. We want to study the vacuum decay, understand it, find its weaknesses. Weaknesses? The Keeper's luminescence flared. You speak of the fundamental breakdown of reality as if it were an enemy to be defeated in battle. Everything has weaknesses, Webb replied simply. Everything can be understood. Everything can be changed. That's not arrogance. That's physics. For every action, there's a reaction. For every force, there's a counterforce. We just have to find it. The silence that followed was different from before. It wasn't the silence of despair or shock. It was the silence of 1,000 species collectively holding their breath, caught between the gravity of certain doom and the faint, illogical pull of something they'd almost forgotten, something that sounded dangerously like hope. The impossible project. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity before the Keeper of Cosmic Knowledge finally spoke, its bioluminescence pulsing in patterns that the translators struggled to interpret. You wish to fight the heat death of the universe with research papers and optimism? Very well. We grant permission for your initiative, though it will change nothing. Perhaps your failure will at least provide closure before the end. Sarah felt something ignite in her chest, a familiar sensation she'd experienced in laboratories at 3 a.m, when an experiment finally worked, when data suddenly aligned into unexpected patterns. It wasn't quite hope yet, but it was possibility. And for humans, that had always been enough. Within weeks, the Solaris station became operational in neutral space, a joint facility that humanity built with frightening speed and determination. Other species contributed resources with the resignation of parents indulging a child's impossible dream, but they contributed nonetheless. Perhaps it was easier than sitting idle, counting down the millennia until dissolution. The station hung against the backdrop of a dying red giant, its solar collectors drinking in the last light of a star already entering its final age. Dr. Chen became the project's chief director, not through political maneuvering, but through the simple fact that no one else wanted the responsibility of leading an effort everyone believed was doomed. She assembled a team that would have seemed absurd in any other context. There was Marcus, who approached the death of reality with the same tactical mindset he'd once used to plan planetary defenses. There was Yuki, who saw the universe as a living system that could perhaps be healed rather than simply observed. And there were others, dozens at first, then hundreds, then thousands, They came from Earth, Mars, the Jupiter colonies, the generation ships that had only recently found new homes among distant stars. They came young and old, physicists and engineers, dreamers and pragmatists. They came because someone had finally asked not what humanity could preserve, but what humanity could become. The Galactic Council watched with the patient curiosity of beings who had seen civilizations rise and fall like waves. Some species sent observers, scientists who claimed they were gathering data for historical records but who found themselves drawn into the human methodology despite their better judgment. The Vraxian ambassador's own daughter arrived at Solaris Station, explaining to her scandalized parent that she would rather spend her remaining centuries attempting the impossible than perfecting funeral rites. Sarah stood in the main laboratory 6 months into the project, surrounded by holographic displays showing vacuum decay propagation patterns. The data was beautiful and terrifying, reality unmaking itself at the quantum level, spreading like cracks through cosmic ice. Every projection confirmed what the Keeper had said. 12,000 years, perhaps less. It's faster than we thought, Yuki said quietly, her fingers dancing across her control interface. The decay is accelerating as it approaches regions of higher matter density. It's feeding on reality itself. Then we need to starve it, Marcus replied, studying the tactical display he'd created that mapped the decay as if it were an invading force. Everything that consumes has a limit. Everything that propagates can be interrupted. A crystalline scientist named Harmonic Seventh, who had joined the team with obvious skepticism, produced a discordant tone. The translator rendered it as frustrated resignation. You speak of interrupting a fundamental cosmic process as if adjusting a chemical reaction. The mathematics is absolute. Entropy always increases, energy always disperses. The universe always dies, always. Sarah turned to face the crystalline, her mind racing through possibilities. That word assumes we know everything about how reality works. But we don't. We thought we understood physics completely in the 20th century. We were wrong. We thought we understood the universe in the 21st. Wrong again. What if we're still wrong? She pulled up a new display, showing quantum field measurements from the edge of the decay zone. Look at this. The vacuum isn't just decaying. It's transitioning to a lower energy state. That means it has energy to give up. Energy that has to go somewhere. Harmonic Seventh's frequencies shifted to something the translator interpreted as reluctant interest. You propose to harness the energy of universal collapse? That is like trying to capture an exploding star with your hands. Humans have captured exploding stars, Yuki interjected, gesturing to the solar collectors outside. We call them reactors. Everything is just a matter of scale and engineering. The breakthrough came not from a single brilliant insight, but from the gradual accumulation of impossible ideas that humans specialized in pursuing. They discovered that the vacuum decay wasn't uniform. It propagated faster through regions of space that had experienced high-energy events, as if reality itself could be scarred and weakened. They found that quantum entanglement patterns could create temporary barriers, like sandbags against a flood, buying milliseconds that could be scaled up to centuries. They learned that consciousness itself, the act of observation, had measurable effects on quantum probability fields in ways that no one had previously considered weaponizing. We're not going to stop it, Sarah announced to the assembled team after 18 months of relentless research. Around her, beings from 30 different species looked up from their workstations, hope and despair warring in their expressions. We can't reverse entropy. We can't rewrite the fundamental laws of physics. She paused, watching faces fall, and felt that familiar spark of defiant joy. But we don't need to. We just need to build something new. The holographic display shifted, showing a theoretical construct that made several senior physicists gasp audibly. It was a structure that existed partially outside normal space-time, anchored to reality through quantum field manipulation, while extending into dimensions that mathematics suggested existed, but that no one had ever accessed. A bubble universe seeded with carefully calibrated initial conditions, separated from the dying cosmos by barriers of twisted space-time and sustained observation. You propose to create a new universe. The Keeper's voice resonated through the communication array, monitoring from the Galactic Council chambers. This is beyond impossible. This is fantasy. It's engineering, Marcus corrected, his tactical mind already working through the logistics. It requires energy levels we've never attempted, quantum manipulation we've never achieved, and coordinated observation from millions of conscious beings maintaining the probability field. So yes, impossible by yesterday's standards, but possible by tomorrow's, Sarah finished. We have 12,000 years. That's enough time to build the impossible. Humans have done more with less. The project transformed. What had been a research initiative became a construction effort that spanned solar systems. Humanity poured resources into it with the single-minded determination that had once built pyramids and space elevators. Other species, infected by human audacity, or simply grateful for any alternative to passive extinction, contributed their own expertise. The crystalline harmonics provided the quantum stabilization matrices. The Vraxians designed the energy collection networks that would draw power from dying stars. The collective synthetic consciousnesses volunteered to become the eternal observers, their awareness maintaining the probability barriers between old reality and new. Sarah worked until her hands shook from exhaustion, then worked more. She was 47 now and sometimes caught her reflection in a monitor and saw someone older, harder, but burning with purpose. Around her, the team had become something more than colleagues. They were architects of impossible dreams, engineers of hope itself. Commander Webb found her one evening in the observation deck, staring out at the construction in progress. Massive quantum field generators floated in formation, drawing energy from a network of stars that had volunteered their remaining light for the project. Behind them, the decay continued its inexorable advance, now visible to the naked eye as distant galaxies flickered and vanished. "Do you ever doubt?" he asked quietly. Sarah considered the question honestly. "Every day, every hour. The mathematics still says we should fail. The universe is still dying. We're building something that shouldn't be possible with tools we haven't fully invented yet. But?" She smiled, and in that smile was every human who had ever looked at the impossible and decided to try anyway. But we're doing it. Right now, across 100 solar systems, 10,000 species who thought they were going to die are instead building something that has never existed. We're teaching the universe that impossible is just a starting point. Marcus nodded slowly. The Keeper sent a message today. They want to know what we'll call it if we succeed. The new universe. When we succeed, Sarah corrected automatically, and I already know what we should call it. She gestured to the construction, to the teams of humans and aliens working together in the face of cosmic death. Hope. We'll call it hope. Because that's what humans have always been best at creating when everything else has run out. Outside the observation window, the universe continued its slow death. But inside, around Solaris Station and spreading across space wherever humans gathered, something else was being born. Not just a new universe, but a new understanding that endings were never inevitable. That heat death was just another problem waiting for a solution, and that as long as consciousness existed, reality itself could be negotiated. The impossible project continued, powered by human stubbornness and the simple refusal to accept that any story had to end in darkness. 12,000 years suddenly seemed like enough time after all. Enough time to build a bridge from dying cosmos to new creation. Enough time to prove that when the universe began to die, only humans had faced it without fear, and in facing it, had discovered that even death itself was just another beginning.